Present.
Linda?
Present.
All right, 6 and 1, we got a quorum. Resolution number 1, acceptance of agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll second the motion.
Ms. Hall,
Second.
second by Victor. Resolved that the Board of Ed accepts and approves the agenda with any additions or deletions. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 6 and 1 absent. Motion carries. Reports to the board. We got first the DECA trip.
Tim Kloss is here with us, and he brought a student.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
Hi, I'm Tim Kloss, and this is Sarah.
Welcome.
We are asking for permission to go to Orlando for the national conference to DECA. Sarah was one of our top winning students that won at states. We're taking 5 students, one also including her. And what else you want to say?
I guess I had a little speech prepared, just
Sure,
something I kind of want to
Sure.
speak of.
Go ahead and have a seat and turn the mic on, please. Should show red. Perfect.
Okay. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. As Mr. Klaus has said, my name is Sarah Alward, and I am a current junior at Hamtramck High School. This is also my first year in DECA, which is a club for students interested in marketing, finance, hospitality, entrepreneurship, and pretty much anything business related. When I first joined DECA, I had no idea how far it would take me. I never imagined that in my first year, I would become a national finalist heading to Florida to represent both Hamtramck High School and the state of Michigan. As a Yemeni American girl, I don't take this lightly. This opportunity is not just a personal achievement, it's a privilege and an honor, and a reflection of how far someone can go when they're supported. And for me, that support starts at home with my family, and especially my sister, who has been my biggest advocate through this all. A few days after my accomplishment was shared on our school's Instagram page, I started getting messages from underclassmen congratulating me, and so many reached out to say how proud they were and how they too were now thinking of joining DECA next year. They explained how inspired they felt seeing someone who looks like them, who shares their background, accomplish something this big. And hearing those words meant everything to me, because in that moment I realized in opening a door for myself, I was holding it open for others, especially for the girls in my community. Grown up as a Yemeni American girl, opportunities for us can often feel limited, not because we aren't capable, but because we're not always supported or expected to go far. There are certain cultural expectations we carry, certain invisible barriers we're always navigating. And when you come from a background where girls are often encouraged to stay quiet or to play it safe or to follow a more traditional path, it takes a lot of strength to speak up, break the cycle, and do things differently. I sat in rooms and walked into competitions where I didn't always feel like I belonged. I was often the only girl who stood out in a room, who wore what I wore, or came from a household like mine. But I kept showing up and I kept pushing forward. Because when you invest in a girl, especially a girl from a background where opportunity is limited, you're not just helping one person, you're creating a ripple effect. That one girl goes on to inspire her sisters, her cousins, her classmates, and even her whole community. I am just one example. One Yemeni girl who was given a chance and ran with it. Imagine what we could do if we gave that same chance to 100 or even 10 girls. DECA has done so much for me, more than I expected. It's helped me grow confident, learn how to speak up, and realize that I can be a leader. As a Yemeni American girl, I never thought I'd be going to Florida to compete at nationals and represent not just my school, but Michigan too. DECA gave me the chance to step out of my comfort zone and show what I'm capable of. It's more than just a business club. It's a space where students like me can dream beyond what we're told is possible. I'm so proud to be where I am. I'm so grateful for DECA, for my teachers, and for my school, and the people who have believed in me, and now I want to pass that belief on. So as I prepare for nationals, I also hope we can continue making accommodations to support the cultural needs of girls like myself. Because when we create a space for everyone to belong, we don't just build stronger leaders, but we also build a stronger community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, any questions? Thank you. All right,
Good
thank
luck, safe
Yeah,
travels.
good luck.
Thank you.
you. Thank you for representing Hamtramck Public Schools.
Thank you.
All right, we have up next for the audit report,
Yeah, tonight we have Brian Dixon with us. He's the partner from Yo and Yo. And, before he starts, I know that we also have Cindy Sheminsky in here. She, without her, getting the audit done would have been extremely difficult. So fortunate to have Cindy, and thank you for her work on the audit.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hi, I'm Brian Dixon from Yo and Yo, so thanks for having me here tonight. We have the slides up on the screen, but also in front of you is the PowerPoint. You also have a copy of the audit report in front of you, the single audit report, and the governance letter, but I did summarize everything in the slides, so we'll just go through those. So the audit process, just to give you a little background, we look at the financial statements, which are the numbers. We are providing an opinion on those financial statements and reasonable assurance, so we're not testing 100% of everything, but we're doing sampling throughout the process, the audit process. We also look at internal controls, which are the district's internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. When we also look at compliance with federal and state, with your federal and state funds, with laws, regulations, and your contracts. So when we looked at the financial statements, we did issue an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, and the financial statements were properly accounted for. This is a little small to see on the screen up there, but in front of you, you do have the balance sheet of your governmental funds. We have your major fund, which is the general fund, and then your non-major governmental column, which is the recreation fund, the food service fund, student activities fund, and your sinking fund in an aggregate column. If we look at your general fund, total assets of $40.7 million at the end of the year, as of June 30th. Total liabilities of just under $22.7 million. Deferred inflows of resources, just under $10.2 million, and those are grants that were requested but not received within 60 days. And then you have your fund balance, just under $7.9 million at the end of the year. We move on to the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Again, your general fund, and then your non-major governmental funds, food service, recreation, student activities, and sinking. And all that detail is in your audit report as well. So your general fund, $58.8 million in revenues, expenditures of $70.8 million, for a decrease this year in your change in fund balance of $11.9 million, bringing you down to that same $7.9 million that I mentioned on the previous slide. And just to remind you, on the previous slide, we did have that $10.2 million in funds that was deferred, basically, and not collected within 60 days, so you couldn't recognize that as revenue. If that were, 10.2 million would have been in there, you would have been at $70 million in revenue, and the decrease in fund balance would have only been $1.7 million.
And just when we go through the budget, Cindy's gonna come up, she has a slide that she's going to sort of go through that also. Because if you look at it, like Brian said, 11.9 million change, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
But it's an accounting
Okay.
thing.
Yes, it is. It was recognized as revenue, but it wasn't collected within 60 days, so therefore for the audit, it had to be backed out. It's just governmental accounting rules. Then we move on to your general fund. So we take those same numbers, the actual numbers, compare that to your original budget, your final budget, and then obviously the percent accurate column on the right hand is where we're gonna focus. Revenues, 65% accurate, but if you add in that 10.2 million, makes you much closer. And then your expenditure is 76% accurate. Both were under budget, and as you can see, the final budget was a lot higher than your original budget, and that was all those grants, and so it's the revenue and the expense netting. But if you added in the 10.2, you will see that your final budget was about 2 million decrease, and you actually came in at about $1.7 billion decrease. So pretty close when you look at it in total. And we take that 58.9 million in total revenues, we break it down in how you receive those funds. We have your federal, interdistrict, local, and state. Obviously, state being the biggest portion. If you add up your state and local together, it's a total of 74% of your funding comes from state and local sources, which is really your property taxes and your state aid. And those, remember, are fixed based on your student counts. You know, you get your foundation allowance that makes up those two numbers. Then we have your federal funding. This year was $12.8 million. But again, majority of that $10.2 million would have been included in there. I want to say it was about $8 million of it would have been included in there as well. And so a big portion, last year that was about 30% of your funding, and it did decrease to the 22% this year. And then the other ones obviously went up proportionately. Then we have your expenditures, $70.8 million in total expenditures. Last year, that was only $60.1 million in expenditures. In 2022 was only $50 million in expenditures. And then 2021 was only $43.8 million in expenditures. So almost a $10 million increase in expenditures over the last 3 years, each of the last 3 years. If we look at these, you know, obviously salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, supplies and materials, capital outlay, and other. Capital outlay was your biggest increase this year. It was 7% last year. It did go up $10.8 million. So it really does skew the other numbers a little bit just because you had so much capital outlay this year, or repairs and buildings additions. So a very big increase there, but the other numbers did obviously come down because of that big skew in your number. But all that 10.8 million was, again, the federal funding spending.
Yeah, just add to that, that's really our ESSER 3 funds where we're doing the, the HVAC, the windows. And then in the budget, why the budget was so far off, I mean, $20 million off on a budget is pretty bad. But what we did is we budgeted all ESSER 3 funds so we could, recognize the funds, and then also, as we didn't approve some of those contracts until after year end. So they didn't make it into last year, if that makes sense.
So I guess in comparison to last year, would you say that capital outlay is the reason, or like why it's 70 million, like that 10 million a year that you mentioned increase, like from last year to this year, would be the repairs?
Well, it's all the capital additions,
Yeah,
to the
okay.
property and equipment, yeah. The increase in that number was $10.8 million. It was just in capital outlay. So we went from 7% capital outlay up to 21% of your total expenditures because of that $10.8 million of expenditures this year. Yep. Then we take those revenues and expenditure numbers in your general fund, divide them by your student counts. This year's student counts was 2,890 students. And so you will see, just looking at this graph in total, this line chart, your overall goal is really to keep that blue line, which is the revenue line, above the red line, so you're always adding to fund balance a little. Maybe it does dip in a year or two. This year, you will see a big change there, almost $4,000 per student change. But again, that $10.2 million that we couldn't recognize as revenue would have brought that up to 23,881. So it would have been much closer to that 24,484 up above in the red. But a good, again, nice upward trend. All those additional expenditures each year coming from ESSER over the last 3 years. You'll see how it's really jumped up the spending, almost $10,000 per student here at the district over the last 3 years in increases. Then we look at your student trend, starting with the 2,890 as of 2024. You'll see that's pretty much right in line with where you were right between 2015, 2016. And also, I looked back a little further, and it was pretty much right on where you were in 2009. So in 2009, your counts went up in enrollment and came back down a little bit. And then in 2015, you see the increases over the years, 2019, 2020, and 2021, and then them decreasing down to in 2024 again. Then we have your general fund balance as dollar values. So we went from almost 13 million in 2020 up to 16.8 million to 14 million in 2022, up to 19.8 million in 2023, but then did have that big decrease this year, down to $7.9 million. But again, if you add that 10.2 million to this, you're sitting at about $18 million in fund balance, so that,
So if I could ask,
yes,
you keep talking about this $10.2
$2 million.
million. So do we recognize that in this coming year?
You will.
Okay.
Yep. So the 10.2, because it wasn't collected within 60 days, it had to be deferred revenue basically, or a liability on your statements, and therefore you will recognize it in this current school year.
So why wouldn't we have collected it?
Within 60 days?
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of movement of your expenditures between grants, and therefore it probably wasn't billed yet out to the ESSER program. And because ESSER was ending on September 30th for ESSER 2, you wanted to make sure you got all the expenditures into ESSER 2 expenditures.
Yeah, and then construction has to go through a process of, the architects have to approve it, the construction managers have to approve it, so it can take, 30 to 45 days before it hits our office for payment. So if you're, and we get them at the end of each month, they will go up to June 30th, and then they will bill. So then it has to go through that process, we get it, early, mid-August, and then we have to turn it around, we have to pay it, we have to put it on our books before we can do reimbursement. So that 60 days becomes a little bit of an issue, especially with, the process that you have to do in order to recognize it.
And if you remember back to about 10 years ago, 2014, the district was in a deficit. So to be sitting at $18 million in fund balance 10 years later, doing pretty good. Then we look at your general fund balance, those same numbers, and as a percentage of your expenditures, you will see they kind of go up and down based on the increases and decreases in the fund balance. But your peer group, if we compare your peer group, this is as of 2023, because we don't have all the numbers yet for 2024, but your peer group of 20.9%, state average of 21.78, and MD does recommend at least a minimum 15% fund balance. And as of 2023, comparing to that, you were at about 32.91. And then that did decrease to 11.12, but again, add in that 10.2 million, you'd be sitting at about 25.9 or 25.49% fund balance, 18 million in fund balance, 25.49%.
For the peer group, is that like similar schools that have the same amount of students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's throughout the state of Michigan schools. Your peers between 3,000 and 3,500
Okay.
students.
Okay, thank you.
But we're not 3,000.
You are just at
Yeah,
the
we're
29.8, yeah.
We're 28.
Just, yep, 2980. Yep, so just at that 3,000.
Yeah.
the next slide. So that was all the numbers. So then internal controls. So we do a lot of testing during the course of the audit, as Jim can attest to. He had to pull a lot of documents between him and Cindy, and so that we could test those. Just a few of them to point out: journal entries, disbursements, payroll we test, receipts. We review your pupil membership. We do sinking fund compliance testing, and then we also do unpredictable procedures. So there's always something new that we're adding each year to the audit, or taking away from the audit, so that management doesn't know what we're gonna look at all the time. We wanna keep them on their toes too. We don't want them to know exactly we're always gonna be testing. So we always do some unpredictability procedures. When we did all these tests, and we'll go over these, we had one material weakness this year and 2 significant deficiencies or non-compliance. And we'll talk about those here on the next page. So when we looked at your gas or governmental auditing standards findings, we had one material weakness, which was lack of timely reconciliations. We were out here for field work in October of 2024 for field work, and we finally got all the reconciliations and everything in February, or 4 months later, February of 2025. We got that final trial balance, that final CFO, schedule of federal expenditures, the federal awards, and then we were able to turn that around pretty quickly and issue it at the beginning of March, your opinion.
So what would have been a timely reconciliation?
Timely reconciliations, I would say everything should be done before that October field work.
So what
Oh,
was
so
the
it should have been like instant, like when you asked for it, it should have already been provided.
They should, yeah, well,
Should have I'm saying like.
June, your year end is June, so that means that was 4 months before our field work, or
So it should have already
3
been.
months, 3.5 months.
Alright.
So yes, they should be reconciled within that time frame.
what was the corrective action for this? Was there a corrective action or no?
There is a corrective action in your audit report that they responded to this finding with the corrective action, that they will have them done timely moving forward. And it was staffing, they brought in a
New staff.
new individual
I see.
into the finance department, and was able to get those reconciliations caught up at that time and provided them to us. And as I mentioned, we did issue an unmodified opinion. So once we got everything, it was accurate, and we tested it all, it was accurate. It was just the timeliness of it.
Yeah,
So the corrective action's being completed or not?
For this year,
For this
yes.
year, okay.
Yeah,
and ideally, to answer your question about, timely, you should be doing it the following month. I mean, you should be on a month-to-month type thing.
Right.
Closing the month, so forth, so, but as Brian said, we didn't have all the information there when they came to audit, so.
But didn't we have the same problem in '23 as well?
We had staffing problems then too. That's when I started.
Okay, continue.
and then on your federal award findings, this year we did audit 3 major programs during the course of a single audit: Title I, Special Education Cluster, and then the ESSER program. And this year we had no material weaknesses, which is good, but we did have 2 significant deficiencies in non-compliance that we identified, and that was both in the payroll of ESSER and payroll of Title I, really the same issue. 2 of 40 we tested under ESSER, and then 3 of the 40 we tested under Title I. They weren't able to provide us supporting documentation for those individuals that we tested on our sample. So those definitely, again, a corrective action plan was put in place in the audit report, and that they will have all the information hopefully for the next year's audit for those.
So they have a full year to correct the issue, the finding, you're saying?
They need to put that corrective action in place and then start doing it right away, because we're gonna obviously,
Look for the same thing.
we're gonna,
again next year.
right, we're gonna look again next year, but we're gonna test the entire year. So hopefully they put it in place, way back when we tested in October, so that what we test next year's audit needs to be done, so.
So when you do an audit, you usually wait an entire year for a corrective action to be put in place? Is that what you mean? Or Typically.
We do not test it until the next year's audit, yes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we
Not
could
that it
do,
shouldn't be done.
From my experience, that if there's a finding that an auditor, finds, typically they give them, 30, 90 days max to correct it or provide, corrective action for it and correct the issue. But waiting an entire year, I don't know, is that the standard?
Well, no, that's, all Brian is saying is that's when they come back out. They don't come and do interim audits throughout the year to check on this. I mean, that's,
But when he's coming back next year, he's gonna pick something else, correct?
we are going to
You're gonna
pick,
test
well,
for
we're gonna
something.
verify that all the findings have been corrected, so we have to test, verify they've been corrected.
Okay.
And then we're going to pick other programs probably and test those as well.
I think an example is on the next page,
Yeah.
Okay.
is from the prior year to this year's audit, sort of showing, that the district corrected issues.
Right. So can we ask the auditor, if they find, found a finding, can we ask them to come back in 90 days and, do another audit to make sure that the finding has been corrected?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's definitely an additional procedure that we can perform. We could come back in, 60, 90, 120, however many days you want us to look at various items within your Title I program or ESSER program.
Okay.
But yeah, that'd definitely be something we
I
can
find that
discuss.
very helpful. I think we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay.
So then, speaking of corrective actions, so last year during our audit presentation, I talked about 6 material weaknesses and 5 material non-compliance issues. This year, you're down to 1 material weakness, which is the same one as last year. The lack of timely reconciliations. The other 5 were corrected. So your budget variances, which was actually findings 2, 3, and 4, all had to do with budget, compliance documentation for Title I. All that compliance documentation was available this year, and then cash management. So they did do a lot of corrective action during the current fiscal year. And then finally, your governance letter. This is required communication between the auditors and those charged with government, so please read through that letter. And then the second part of that letter is the management comments. These are not findings but they are recommendations. They're not material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or findings, but they are recommendations of items to improve. So just the net cash resources of your food service program, you are over the limit that you can have, so make sure to look at that balance and spend it down appropriately. Your unearned and unavailable grants, we talked about this almost on every slide, but that $10.2 million of your 60-day rule revenue, as well as $1.1 million in grants that were over requested. So just need to spend and request those funds timely. And then finally, late filing of your audit. This is 2 years in a row that we have had the audit late due to timely reconciliations of your accounting records. So we just recommend that you put controls in place to fix that material weakness of the timely reconciliations in order to get the audit completed and issued by that November 1st deadline for next year. Any questions? So we are about a month earlier in issuing this year, so it did get better. Those reconciliations got better.
Yeah.
So it's 36 days earlier than last year on the opinion. But still, we need to make sure that those reconciliations are done timely and that they're accurately done, and so that we can issue our opinion before that November 1st deadline.
So I want to thank Brian for coming down at 3:30 today. ASME came in. What we do is we put it out for the unions to come in, staff to come in, so then Brian can meet with them, go over the audit, sort of in a non-public setting. So ASME did show up. Brian was here. He came from Saginaw.
Yes.
Yeah. So we probably want to let him get on the road. And
But I'm here for any questions that you have, so.
I'm good. Anyone else? No? Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah.
thanks, Brendan. All right, I'm gonna have Cindy come up to the table. Because what she's going to do is, once we get to a slide in here on that $10.2 million, she's going to, I mean, we sent it out in a weekly update, so you could, read it, and then not look at the audit and say, oh my gosh, what happened, where's $10 million? Cindy's gonna be able to explain that to you. And with that, I will start off with the general fund revenues. So just looking at change really from the original budget. The local is pretty close. Some of that has to do with our 18 mills. We renewed 18 mills, now we're collecting 18 mills. On the state went up about $2.5 million. And a lot of that is due to, we have an infrastructure grant that's $1 million this year. Last year, I think it's part of the well, no, it's not part of the 10 million. The $2 million that we had for the accelerated coaches, we could not recognize it last year because we didn't spend any of the money. We started spending it this year. So that accounts for, about $3 million difference. And really then the bottom line would be, well, that really accounts for most of the differences there. State aid membership is at 2870.87. Last year we were at 2890, so down about 20 students. We had projected to be up. I believe the original projection was 2920, so we messed that one up a little bit. I'm going to go over this in a little bit more detail in a minute. This is really just putting, the fund balance, the revenue, and the expenditures together to come down to, just an overall picture. Again, you're looking at our estimated fund balance of expenditures. We're looking at this number, the 16, sorry, Sebastian.
Yeah.
Okay. 16.5 into the 87, so that's 19.1 projection. Now, what we have talked about is ESSER funds. Last year when we did the original budget, at that time we had estimated the amount to go over the ESSER funds into the general fund, which we've talked about since I've been here now for almost 2 years. We estimated that at $8,770,000 based on everything we see in the ESSER fund now. Once we've budgeted, we'll have, we only need about $8.1 million. Now that does not account for the $4 million that our extension didn't go through. So with the ESSER funds, we're carrying that as if it went through until we're told that there's no option. So we're working with MDE, the State Attorney General. There are options to, I guess the U.S. Department of Education does not have the carryover application yet. MDE and the State Attorney General are working on that. I also believe that we're in the budget period, the School Aid Act. So if the federal government doesn't come through, we're in a good place to appeal to the governor, to the House, to the Senate to request that $4 million. So we're proceeding as if we're receiving it. So, no, that's fine. Go forward. This is, I'm gonna turn over to Cindy. She's going to explain a lot of what Brian was talking about with that deferred and unearned revenue.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for having me here today. This slide is a slide that we had provided you guys last month also. It kind of shows you what our 24 final fund balance would have looked like had we been able to recognize that revenue of $10 million. So you'll see that in the very top, we break out the fund balance between general and federal funds because we account for those separately, but they roll in together into the general fund. And so what this does is it shows you we have this $7.8 million ending fund balance per the audit report. Those will agree to your documents that you were provided by Yo and Yo. And then if we added back in the $10.2 million, we would have had a fund balance at the end of 2024 of $18 million. The amount that you see there of the 10.1 or the 10.2 million, that's deferred revenue in all federal programs. And we do have some federal programs in our cafeteria fund. So as you will see when Jim moves forward in the slides, and it might have been actually on the slide prior. Do you mind going back one slide? So on this slide here, the very top line where we talk about the beginning fund balance, I can't see that exactly well, but we break out the state and local and the federal projects, and those should agree to this $7.8 million. Do they, Jim, agree to there?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the breakout between the funds that I'm talking about on this slide with the $10.2 million deferred revenue on it. And then the other thing I wanted to point out on this slide is if you follow that federal projects column all the way down, you'll see that where we have the change in or revenue over expenditures for the year, that we are adding $10 million to the bottom line. Does everybody see that on there? I can't really see that very well, but that's where it is. Okay, so can you now move to the next slide, please? So that $10.1 million is really the equivalent of this 10.167 that's on here. And again, the difference is there are some federal funds in different, like the cafeteria fund, different funds. But once you add that together, we'd be at an $18 million fund balance, less what we have in the works for the construction projects. We would have ended up 2024 with almost a $10 million fund balance, $9.9 million, compared to the 7.8 that we actually ended up with. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that, but in a nutshell, the reason why we show that $10 million to this year, I just want to make a point of it that that should not happen on a going forward basis, and that federal funds account or fund should always zero out or be very close to zero. We do always have timing differences with deferred revenue. They happen all the time, but typically not in such large dollar amounts.
So I have a question. So let's say next year, if everything was spent correctly, I guess the only thing that would show is the extra 10 million that we accounted for from this year? Or is that like a
So for next year,
incorrect correlation?
so for next year, talking 2026, the 25-26.
Yeah, so like for this 10 million wasn't included in the 23-24, right? So
In 24-25.
oh, 24-25. So it should should that difference be showed in 25-26? That extra 10 million?
That extra 10 million actually will, it sort of like zeroes out.
Oh, okay.
The
So
fund at the end of
it shouldn't show an
2025.
extra 10 million, but it
Right.
should at least zero out.
It'll zero it out, so
Okay.
we'll start 25-26 flush.
Okay.
So the only adjustments you would see is if at the end, and they would probably come at amendment time, because when we do the original budget, we don't know that we're not going to collect everything. So you would see at an amendment, if there were significant deferred revenues, we would point those out. But typically, it is not something
It
that we would.
shouldn't like just pop up the following
Right,
year?
no,
Okay.
we're doing
It's
a,
amended, as you
Right.
mentioned. Okay, I understand. Okay.
it's a timing difference,
Right, right.
and as Brian pointed out, we are working on getting things into the system and drawn down and reported and reconciled much quicker. And because of that, and because of pretty much the ESSER's grant is over with, so we don't quite have the funds available in that grant to experience such a large deferred revenue going forward, that we should not have that going.
So it should have happened in the future again because of,
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of things are amplified by ESSER funds, because we had $35.2 million in ESSER 3, we had 16 million in ESSER 2. As that's going through that, there's a lot of record keeping and reporting, and, you know, unfortunately with federal grants, you can't get the money until you've paid. So you have to go through the process and get reimbursement.
okay, thank you.
So those amounts for this particular year, the ESSER funds are larger than they would be for this year then?
Actually, I think that we have budgeted about 20 million this year, but the ESSER, well, once we come to the summer, we only, we have $4 million left of ESSER funds to spend.
Mhm.
That should be spent before the summer, so there shouldn't be that timing difference. I mean, realistically, they're doing work, you know, after hours at Dickinson East and the high school, so I would imagine that would be spent down by June. We should be able to get reimbursement in July and receive money within 60 days. I don't anticipate that happening.
No, it's unusual, that it was just so large. But timing, construction really is does create a lot more distance between when you spend it and then when you can
The traffic,
collect
kind of
it.
like a traffic thing, like it takes too long.
Mhm. So any more questions on this slide?
Okay, thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Okay, then, on the next slide, I'm just looking at general fund only, so trying to break out the, you know, the federal funds and general funds combined, so you can just see more of a comparison. Yeah, I'm just gonna go over some of the larger amounts, like, for special education, if you look at, I'll just point it out, it's right here, 1.77. And this really started at the end of last year, or actually last year. So in 22-23, we received over $400,000 of IDE ESSER skip the ESSER, IDE flow-through funds. We didn't spend it in 22-23. That was one of the things in the audit. And then we also received approximately the same amount in 23-24. We're able to spend all of that money in 1 year. So it sort of skews the number here. It skews the salary basically. Whereas last year it was, you know, about $1 million. This year it's about $2 million because you're taking more funds out last year by putting them in a grant. The other thing is, we opened 7 self-contained classrooms last year. So, think about that. That's, you know, up to 8 students. You have a teacher. You have 3 to 4 paras. 7 classrooms. So we opened those throughout the last part of last year. This year, you're seeing the full effect of those classrooms. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. Next one, no, sorry. Not yet. Let me see, where's another one? let's go down to instructional support. That's the $3 million. So, we've talked about the coaches, 27Q coaches. That's the $2 million that we didn't spend last year. All the coaches are in this function code. So you're seeing the effect of, the 8 coaches, plus we have a literacy coach that we get reimbursed for. We have a math coach, which we just filled this year, so that's another $150,000. So this is really a lot of grant funding. And then with the coaches, the idea would be once, as I said in the board update, we received MDE's approval to carry that over next year. So we'll have the coaches funded next year, then after that, they would either go into at-risk or Title I beyond that. There's also some other stipends. We have 30, these are all state funds, so we have teacher PD funds, 35J, the VLI that was previously through ESSER funds, now is in the general fund. And then we also have special education compliance and curriculum people in this amount. Let's see if there's another. I would go down to, school administration, that's an odd one that actually went down. We settled a lawsuit last year, so that lawsuit flowed through last year's administration, and then this year, so you're seeing abnormal amount last year. Going forward, maybe maintenance, that's $851,000. There's a decrease because the director retired last spring, increase in, because now we have a contracted director. Also, our liability insurance, because of our history, increased $300,000. So we're paying, almost $450,000 now for liability insurance. And then the other item in here is in supplies. We have a grant called 31AA, which is for safety and security. We're starting a door replacement throughout the district. You can only use this for certain purposes. This is a purpose that we can use it for, and that's about $450,000 of that grant. And I think that sort of covers everything. Capital outlay, a big decrease. This is the Holbrook kitchen started in the summer of '24, and then also the basement at KMS. Those are included in that. And that's all I really had on that. If you could go to the next one, Sebastian. And then what we do is we, for our grants, we just list all the grants. We go down through, and this would reconcile to the front page. You can see that ESSER 3 is about $19 million. Again, all but about $4 million of that has already been expended. We're just, our other big one would be title funds. So if you look at title carryover of 1.1 and this year's grant of $8.5 million, you're looking at about $9.6 million in title. Now, the problem with title funds is they're restricted. So they're really for tier 2 and tier 3 supports. Those are things that we have to work on staffing to identify how to get staff into this. I know that state and federal, Nate, Ty, Bria worked on, they actually brought staff in, interviewed them to find out what they do in their job, to see if we can move staff into grant funds out of the general fund. So we're working to identify what they do, what staff do, it sounds funny, you're trying to identify what staff do, but, you're actually, you might hire somebody as a general ed para, but they're actually doing something different. So we're trying to determine what they're doing, so for next year, we can move them possibly into grant funds, relieve the general fund. So, and I think that's it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sorry. Now, the individual funds. Food service fund, there's not a lot of change. We pretty much know what's going on as we go into the year because we have a contract. What Brian did identify is that $1.5 million, you're only supposed to have 2 months worth of fund balance. So we have to work with MDE and come up with a plan on how to spend that money. I thought it would have been the Holbrook Kitchen, but that is in the general fund. We're gonna work with MDE to find out if that should have been in the food service. So, next one. Recreation, we do have a millage for recreation. It goes through, I believe, 20, can you scroll up just a little bit more?
12,
Up
25.
the other- 27? Is it listed?
25 here,
Oh, okay.
12, 25.
And, there's not a lot of change here. Go to the next one. Next one, sinking fund. You might ask why we have a sinking fund, because that expired in December of '23. Well, we had one more collection last year. We collected the $1 million. So at that time, we had $1.46 million. Now, we didn't budget it for anything at the start of the year. We're gonna hold the money. What we're looking at is we could potentially move some of this money for the DE or the high school when the time comes. There's about $750 million, or $750 million, I wish. $750,000 that we could apply to the high school or DE. And that, again, that will depend on what happens with the US Department of Education. And the last one, which was?
That's the last one.
Oh, the last one, okay,
That's the
right,
last one.
thank you. I'm sorry, any questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we do not have a millage right now on the sinking fund.
We do not.
Is it going to go to the vote again, and if so, when?
There is no plan to do that at this time. We have recreation millage that will be coming up.
So will that be in November?
No, it would be possibly next year. I believe it expires next year.
Because it says it expires December of this year.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. Isn't it 26?
It says 25.
I'll look at that.
Oh,
Any questions?
Yeah, so what, for the food service, budget, what is 2 months worth? Like what's the,
You would just divide the expenditures, so I don't know if it was 3.2 million, so whatever 2/12 of that would be, that should be what your fund balance should be. Basically what, it's a reimbursement type thing too. Then also we get state aid, so they're giving you a little bit of a cushion there.
so how much, like, I guess, how would we spend this money? Like,
Um,
food or better food or what, or like?
Well, that's possible,
Oh,
but,
okay.
the other thing that you normally do is you, buy equipment, you modify the lines, the lunch lines, you do something to the kitchen. That's what they did at Holbrook.
Right.
Renovated the kitchen.
Oh, I see, okay, all right. Thank you.
But all that has to go through MDE. You have to get approval from
First,
MDE to
before,
do things, yeah.
oh, okay.
Alright. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
Alright, closed session, resolution number 2. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Amy Haynes, second by Ms. Hall. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby go into closed session for the following purposes. Section 8C, collective bargaining strategy and discussion pursuant to attorney-client privileges. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, 6 ayes, 1 absent. Motion carries. We go into closed session at 6:55.
You just left?
Yeah, that's
I
what
guess,
he
yeah.
said. No, I asked
That's what he said. All right, going back to open session, resolution number 3, can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Ms. Hall,
Second.
second by Mr. Elgin. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby resume the meeting in open session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I hate to do it.
Okay, 8:58. So 5 and 1 absent, motion carries. Actually 2, I'm sorry, 2 absent. Resolution number 4, acceptance of audit report, can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Ms. Hall,
Second.
second by Linda. Resolved that the Hamtramck Board of Education does hereby accept and approve the final audit for the 2023-2024 fiscal year as presented. Linda, how do you vote?
Yes.
Elgin,
Yes.
Watson,
Aye.
Ms. Hall?
Aye.
All right, 5 ayes, 2 absent, motion carries. Resolution number 5, approval of 2024-2025 budget amendment. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Linda,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Elgin. Resolved that the Hamtramck Board of Education does hereby approve the amend 2024-2025 budget as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 5 and 2 absent, motion carries. Resolution number 6, school of choice. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Linda,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Elgin. Resolved that the Board of Education does hereby direct administration to implement school of choice option 105 within county and 105C contingency counties for grades K to 12 during the 2025-2026 school year. Fall enrollment, following the guidelines below. Application for K to 12 will be accepted from April 10, 2025 through July 15, 2025, based on the open seats by grades by schools as attached. Any questions?
I have a question. Schools that like KMS, right now they have no spots. So say for instance, a spot get open past the deadline. Are we gonna allow kids to come in? No?
We only take applications on the open seats.
Mm.
And there's also a priority in regards to that. It's like, residents first and then,
Oh, well, not residents, so it would be sibling
school
match,
choice.
what's called sibling match. So
Okay.
if, my brother is in the school, I apply for ECE at kindergarten, I would have first choice. And then
Makes
if,
sense.
if we go over that, then there's a random draw to get down to the number.
So what about people that apply in time, but there's no seats for KMS? Can they apply even though there's no seats right now?
No. We won't take applications.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Elgin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Watson?
Aye.
Ms. Hall?
I don't know. I'm thinking. Come back to me.
Aye.
Linda? Aye. I vote aye. Ms. Hall?
I guess.
All right, 5 ayes, 2 absent, motion carries. Resolution number 7, approval of DTE service work at Dixon East.
Motion.
Motion by Linda,
I'll second.
second Mr. Legahane. Resolved the Board of Education does hereby approve the installation of the 3-phase electric work at 3385 Norwalk Street for a commercial feeder install, including the new line extension, total cost not to exceed 1 million, is that 112, 455, 23. Any questions?
No.
No questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 5 ayes, 2 absent, motion carries. Consent agenda, resolution number 8, approval of consent agendas. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Hall,
I'll second.
Second.
second by Mr. Legahane. I heard first. Resolved that the Board of Education approve the following items under the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. 5 ayes, 2 absent, motion carries. We'll go to audience participation. This portion of the agenda is for citizens to address any questions or comments to the board. The board will listen, take comments and question under advisement and not respond at this time. The presiding officer will refer questions to the superintendent for research and response. Person wishing to address the Board of Education must complete the audience participation form and submit it to the board's president before the meeting starts. Form must be filled out completely to be accepted. We have Tony.
Okay. So it's clear that the federal funding to schools can and will be cut. We do not yet know what more is to come, though I'm sure that Washington and the current regime will use bully tactics to enforce conformity and compliance to their worldview. I have a question. Does this board have our back? All of our backs? Will this board stand up and say that every member of the HPS family has value and rights? Will this board honor the stories and history of all members of the HPS family? Do you have our backs? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Joanne?
Nope, that was it.
All right, thank you. Any more business items to conduct? All right, before we adjourn, I'd like to just make a comment. I'd like to thank the board, all of my 2 colleagues for attending Reading Month.
You're
Mr.
true, cause I
My
attended
2
too.
board colleagues, did you attend?
Not with you guys. I wasn't invited. I did it all by myself.
I wasn't
Did you?
invited.
I wasn't-
invited either.
No, I went to
I wasn't
Hillbrook and I read to all their elementary kids.
Did you? Why don't you share that with me?
Why do I have to share with you? It's under me.
Well, thank you for attending,
I did stuff
Ms.
on
Hall
that.
and Mr. Legahane and Mr. Obaid. Appreciate you, Mr. Legahane, you made it to every school, K through 8, me and you. I appreciate that for, your time in doing that. We engaged with a lot of students and we really had fun. And I'd like to also thank everyone from our community that went, from the police chief, the fire department chief, even the president of the Wayne State University. And I think Bria Larson, yeah, and Cindy, appreciate it, thanks to all. And, yeah.